I never thought I'd be the guy caught in a situation like this. Honestly, who does? I mean, I'd heard the usual stories, cheating spouses, secret texts, betrayal. But I never thought I'd find myself staring at my own phone, face burning, fingers trembling, reading a message that punched me right in the gut. It was 3 days before the wedding. 3 days before I was supposed to say, I do, and I'd been feeling that strange flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. The kind where your stomach knots up and your hands get sweaty, but nothing prepared me for what I saw. I was just scrolling through a few last-minute things, checking the wedding playlist, making sure the venue was set, when I noticed a notification from my wife's phone. It was a message from someone I didn't recognize, but the tone. It hit me like a punch to the chest. Affectionate, intimate, secretive. My eyes froze on the screen as I read the messages. They weren't just casual chats. They were full-blown flirtations, teasing, and downright intimate exchanges. Words I shouldn't have seen, spoken in secret. I felt my stomach churn, a wave of nausea washing over me as I scrolled through her words with my fingertips trembling. Can't wait to see you tonight, one message read, followed by a heart emoji. Another said, you're all I think about even when I shouldn't. That's when the cold hit me. My mind raced. Who was this person? Was it someone from work, a friend, or worse? The worst part. The last message was from her, but it was more than just a text. It was a photo, a close-up of her face, lips slightly parted, eyes dark and unreadable. I stared at it for what felt like forever, then looked at the timestamps. The messages came in just a few hours ago. My stomach sank so low I thought I'd throw up. I didn't need more proof. The phone slipped from my hand and I just stood there frozen, feeling every muscle tense and clench. My mind spun in circles. How long had this been going on? How many times? Was I really that blind? I kept telling myself it couldn't be true. It had to be a mistake. But the evidence was right there, undeniable. My wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone, was cheating on me with my best man, my best man, the guy I had trusted with my life, the guy I'd celebrated with, the guy I'd had beers with, the guy I'd looked at as family. And now I knew the truth. I felt my jaw tight. My fists clenched so hard my nails cut into my palms. I wanted to scream, break something, but I didn't. Instead, I just quietly put the phone down and stared at the wall, trying to process the storm raging inside me. How did I miss all the signs? Was I really that oblivious? I remembered the little things, her avoiding certain topics, her phone always out of reach, the way she'd get defensive when I asked about her evenings. All red flags, tiny but obvious now that I looked back. The worst part, I had to decide what to do next. The wedding was in 3 days. My mind kept circling back to that. How could I go through with it? Could I even pretend? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that secret smile she'd give when she thought I wasn't looking, the way her fingers brushed someone else. I knew what I had to do, but it felt like my insides were being ripped apart. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just walk away and pretend like everything was fine. Not anymore. I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling the cold rush of adrenaline in my veins, and made a decision. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I was going to find out everything, plan my revenge, and make sure she paid for breaking everything I believed in. I could feel the anger simmering, a hot, bubbling rage I hadn't known I had. The wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but now, it was a battlefield and I was just getting started. I looked around my room trying to figure out my next move. I knew I had to act carefully, quietly. I couldn't afford any mistakes. I had to be smart, sharp, and cold. Because once I handed her that ring, once I said those vows, I'd lose the last shred of control I had. But if I played my cards right, I could take everything from her. Her trust, her peace, and maybe even her happiness. And she'd regret it. She'd regret every second she thought she could get away with this. I clenched my fists again, feeling the fury settle deep in my chest. I was about to become the man who knew her secret, the man who'd make her wish she'd never crossed me. That's when I decided I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. No more hiding. No more pretending. The game was on, and I was about to turn the tables in ways she'd never see coming. I spent that night packing around my apartment, trying to piece together how I'd let it get this far. Every step I took, I kept hearing her voice in my head, that sneaky little smile she always had when she thought she was getting away with something. I could practically see her face, her eyes sparkling with mischief, when she'd lie or hide something from me. Now I knew she'd been hiding a lot more than I ever suspected. I kept mumbling to myself, I need to know everything, over and over. I didn't want to just catch her in the act. I wanted to understand how deep this web went. If I was going to destroy her, I needed to have all the pieces, all the dirt, and I needed to do it without her catching on. I decided I'd follow her. Not right away, I didn't want to seem suspicious. But I was going to watch her, see who she was really talking to, where she was going. I set up a cheap hidden camera in my living room, pointing at her phone charger just enough to catch her sneaking out or texting someone. The plan was simple: catch her in the act, then strike back harder. The next day, I watched her leave early for what she said was a doctor's appointment. I didn't believe her, not for a second. I followed her at a distance. She got into her car and I kept behind her at a safe distance. She drove to a small coffee shop on the edge of town. Nothing unusual about that, but then I saw her get into a different car, one I didn't recognize. Something about it felt wrong, tense. That's when I knew this was bigger than just a quick affair. This was a full-blown affair, and she was hiding it well. I watched her park, go inside, then minutes later she stepped out with a different guy. They looked cozy, her hand on his arm, her laugh loud and carefree. The kind of laugh she never let slip around me. My stomach twisted and my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I could feel the heat rising behind my eyes. Nice, I muttered under my breath, a bitter taste in my mouth. So that's who she's been sneaking around with. I stayed in my car, watching as they drove away together. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I was done waiting around, hopping for some divine revelation or a sign that she'd changed. No, I needed to act. I had to make her feel the same pain I was feeling right now, maybe even more. Back at my apartment, I started planning. I needed leverage, something undeniable. I remembered the texts, the photos, the way she'd looked at her phone last night. I had to get my hands on more evidence. I needed to know exactly who she'd been texting, where they'd been meeting, how long this had been going on. I thought about hiring a private investigator, but honestly, I didn't want to spend more money or risk her catching on, so I devised a plan myself. I created a fake email account, one she'd never suspect. I called it The Truth. I used it to send her a message, pretending to be her lover, asking her to meet again to take things to the next level. I sent the message late at night when I knew she'd be home alone. I watched her phone from across the room, heart pounding. When she saw the email pop up, her eyes widened. She froze for a second, then quickly deleted it, but I caught it all. Face went pale and her hands trembled as she tried to hide her phone from me. "You've been lying," I said calmly but with a sharp edge in my voice. "Who is that? Who have you been talking to?" She stammered, trying to deny it, to dismiss it, but I wasn't buying her act anymore. The proof was right there. I knew everything. That's when I decided I'd let her stew in her own lies. I'd been patient enough. I'd gathered enough. The next step was clear. I was going to confront her, but not just yet. I needed her to believe she was still in control, like she had the upper hand. That's how I'd make her pay. I sat silently, watching her squirm. She kept glancing at her phone, trying to delete more messages, cover her tracks. I was about to blow her cover wide open, but I wanted her to realize she'd been caught red-handed. No more hiding. No more secrets. Soon, I knew, she'd be begging for mercy, or maybe just begging me to leave her alone. But I wasn't about to let her off that easy. Not after what I'd uncovered. Not after her betrayal, her lies, that sneaky smile she'd worn when she thought she was untouchable. The day was coming where everything would come crashing down. And when it did, she'd wish she'd never crossed me. The moment I decided to go all in was when I found the perfect piece of evidence, something that would turn the tables and make sure she knew I was serious. It wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about making her feel the same crushing betrayal she'd handed me. That's when I started putting my plan into motion, step by step. I cleaned out my email drafts and set up a new email account under a fake name, something anonymous, something cold. I called it The Truth, and I started sending her messages, just enough to keep her on edge but not so much that she'd catch on immediately. I told her I knew everything, that I knew about her affair, about the secret meetings, that I had proof. I played it cool, calm, unemotional. I didn't want her to think I was desperate. I wanted her to feel hunted. I crafted a message that sounded like a lover's confession, something that would make her panic. I told her I knew she was sneaking around, that I had recordings, texts, everything. I told her I was watching her, waiting for her to slip up again. I sent it late at night, just after she went to bed. I wanted her to wake up anxious, worried, paranoid. The next morning, I watched her reaction from behind a curtain. She sat frozen, staring at her phone, then her face twisted into a mixture of shock and terror. She looked around like she was trying to figure out how I could possibly know. Her hands trembled as she unlocked her phone, her eyes darting across the screen. She looked at the message again and then at her own phone, as if trying to deny what she saw. "Who the hell is this?" she whispered aloud, voice trembling. She looked panicked, her blood draining from her face. "What is this?" I kept quiet, just watching her. Her eyes darted around the room, then she clenched her fists so tight I thought she might punch the wall. I could see the wheels turning in her head, realizing she'd been caught but still trying to pretend she was. That was the beginning of her unraveling. I decided I'd have to push harder. I called her, acting like I was furious, angry, betrayed. I wanted her to know I wasn't joking. I said, "Who is this? Who have you been sneaking around with?" I kept my voice steady but cold, forcing her to lie or crack. She hesitated. "It's nothing," she said, but her voice was shaky. That was all I needed. I knew she was lying and I was going to make her regret it. I told her, "I know everything. I've seen the messages, I've got the proof. Do bother lying anymore." I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end, her voice hitching. "You're overreacting, it's nothing." "No," I shot back, voice low and dangerous. "You're the one overreacting. You're the one hiding things. It ends now." I knew I needed to keep her on edge to make her think I had more. So I went through her phone, find more messages, more photos. I kept everything. I wanted her to feel exposed, because the truth was I was just getting started. I also started planting small clues around the house, like her phone with a new password I set but knew she wouldn't change. I moved her keys, her purse, making her get used to the idea that I was watching her every move. I wanted her to feel the paranoia creeping in, because it was only the beginning. That night I sat in my living room, watching her through the security camera feed I set up. She was packing, nervously glancing at her phone, trying to figure out what I knew and what I didn't. Her face was tense, eyes darting, hands trembling. It was the look of someone who knew they'd been caught but refused to accept it. I knew then I had her exactly where I wanted. I slid a small note under her pillow that read, "We need to talk, it's time to face the truth." Just enough to keep her guessing. I wasn't planning to confront her right away. I wanted her to stew in her own anxiety. A part of me felt sick, honestly. But I also felt strangely alive, clear in my purpose. I was going to make her suffer just like she'd made me suffer. I was going to make her see what it was like to be betrayed, to be lied to have everything she thought was secure suddenly ripped apart. I knew I couldn't keep this secret forever, but the waiting made my pulse race. Every minute I felt the weight of what was coming. It was like holding a loaded gun, and I was just waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger. And when I finally did, well, she'd regret ever crossing me. That much I was sure of, because this game, it was only just beginning, and I was about to take her down so hard she'd never forget it. The silence in my apartment was deafening that night. I kept the feed on, watching her every move, feeling the familiar knot tighten in my stomach. She was restless, packing around like a caged animal, constantly glancing at her phone or the door. Her eyes were darting and her hands kept fiddling with her necklace as if trying to comfort herself, but she couldn't hide the mounting panic. I knew she was trying to stay composed, but I could see through her act. The paranoia was eating her alive. That's when I decided it was time to escalate. I couldn't sit back and wait for her to slip up. I had to make her face the music, to make her understand that I knew exactly what she'd been doing, how far she'd gone. In the quiet, I slipped out a small envelope I'd prepared earlier and taped it to the inside of her bathroom mirror. When she saw it in the morning, her face would go white and her mind would spin. Inside, I put a simple note. "We both know what you've been hiding. Tomorrow, we talk." I stayed up late, my muscles tense, palms sweaty, heart pounding. Every so often, I'd check the camera feed. Her packing grew more frantic and her breathing became shallow, rapid. She was on the edge of losing control and I wanted her to feel it. The next morning I watched her wake up, eyes immediately darting toward her phone. She hesitated before reading the note, then her shoulders sank. Her face paled and her breath hitched. That was the moment I knew I'd done enough groundwork. Now I was going to take her to the brink. I called her, voice calm but icy. "We need to talk now." She came out of the bedroom, her face a mask of guilt and fear. She looked at me, trembling, hands clasped tightly. "What's going on?" she asked, voice shaky. I stared at her, cold and steady. "You've been lying to me, playing me for a fool. I've seen everything, the texts, the photos, the late-night meetings. You're done pretending." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. "You've betrayed me with my best man. How long has this been going on? Tell me the truth." She looked down, silent. Her lips trembled, then she whispered, "It's been a few months. I didn't mean for it to go this far, I swear." I shook my head slowly, feeling the rage bubble up again. "That's not good enough. You thought you could hide it, keep it secret like I wouldn't find out. Well, guess what? I did, and I've been planning my revenge ever since." I pulled out the evidence I'd collected, screenshots, recordings, even a few of her secret messages. Her eyes widened and she tried to speak, but I cut her off. "You don't get to explain. You only get to listen." I told her I arranged something, a way for her to see how much she'd hurt me, how much she'd damaged everything we had. I handed her a USB drive. "Watch this. It's everything I've collected, and after we'll talk about what happens next." Her trembling hands took the drive and she nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. That's when I knew I was about to give her a taste of her own medicine. While she watched, I decided I'd set the stage even further. I'd sent an anonymous message to her lover, telling him I knew everything. I told him to meet me at the same coffee shop she'd been visiting. I wanted him to see that I was serious, that I wasn't going to let this slide. I slid out of the apartment for a little while, leaving her to watch the evidence. I parked nearby, secretly watching her from across the street. Her face twisted as she saw the video clips, her hands clutching her head. She was crying now, desperate, trying to deny everything. And then I saw him arrive, the guy from earlier, the one she'd been meeting in secret. He looked nervous, fidgeting as he approached her window. Good. That's exactly what I wanted, for her to see him, to see what she'd been risking. When she finally saw him, her face went blank. The shock, the betrayal, it was all written in her eyes as she looked at him. That's when I felt my own fist tight. She'd been so convinced she could hide this forever, but I was about to make sure she'd never forget it. I took my phone out and sent her a message. "It's over. You've lost everything." I knew she'd be reeling, confused, scared. That's what I wanted, too. Make her see that her actions had consequences, real, painful consequences. As I walked away from the coffee shop, I felt that bitter taste of satisfaction. The plan had worked. She was broken, and I'd made sure she'd never trust someone again. I hadn't just destroyed her secret, I'd taken her dignity, her peace, and her sense of security. Now, I just had to wait. Wait for her to realize that her betrayal had come full circle. That's when I'd finally confront her face to face and she'd see the man she'd hurt, who was no longer willing to be the forgiving guy she once knew. It was only a matter of time. The house felt different when I got back that evening, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for what was to come. I had already planned everything, knew exactly how I wanted the confrontation to go, but I had to see her first, to watch her reaction, to gauge just how much damage I'd done. She was in the living room, sitting on the couch, clutching that USB drive like it was her last hope. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes staring at nothing. When I walked in, she looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and fear. The moment I saw her like that, I knew I'd hit her where it hurt, deep, raw, and undeniable. "Did you watch it?" I asked quietly, my voice colder than I intended. She nodded, tears still flowing. "Yes, I saw everything." I took a slow step toward her, feeling every inch of my body tighten with controlled rage. "And what do you think now? After everything you lied about, everything you hid?" She looked away, trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. Don't lie to me," I snapped. "You wanted what you thought you couldn't have. You wanted him. You wanted to feel alive, maybe even free for once. Well, congratulations." I paused, voice rising just enough to cut through the air. "You got what you wanted, but I'm not going to be your punching bag anymore. That ends tonight." Her voice broke. "Please don't do this. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix what you've broken. Sorry doesn't undo the pain you caused me us." I clenched my fists, then took a deep breath to steady myself. "But I'll give you one last chance. 'Cause I believe everyone deserves a choice." That's when I handed her a set of keys. Her eyes widened in confusion. "What's this?" "Your escape route," I said. "You're leaving tonight. I want you to pack your things, get out, and never come back. Here's your ticket, your way out of the house, the life we built, everything." She stared at the keys, then back at me, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You're serious?" "I don't want to see your face again," I said quietly. "This isn't a punishment, it's a mercy. Maybe you'll find what you're looking for somewhere else, somewhere where secrets and lies don't run your life." She hesitated, then finally nodded, voice barely a whisper. "Okay, I'll go." Watching her pack that night, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I'd cut the tie, the anchor that kept me chained to a lie. I'd taken back control, but at what cost? The house was silent now, save for the soft rustle of her belongings. I felt the weight lift, but also the hollow ache of betrayal. As she left with her suitcase, I handed her the last thing, her wedding ring. I placed it gently in her hand, watching her eyes flicker with pain. "You can keep that," I said. "It's a symbol of everything you threw away." She looked at me, tears blurring her vision. "I'm sorry," she whispered one last time. I nodded and closed the door behind her, the sound echoing in the empty apartment. I leaned against it for a moment, feeling the cold rush of satisfaction mixed with a strange sense of loss. I thought about what I'd do next. Would I lose sleep over it? Would I keep blaming her? Or was this finally the end of a chapter I'd never get to rewrite? On the surface, I felt victorious. The woman who'd betrayed me was gone, and I'd taken back my life. But beneath that, I knew something real had shifted. I'd been hurt deeply, and no matter how much I wanted to feel victorious, the truth was I was forever changed. That night, I sat alone and stared out the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, and for a moment I wondered if I'd ever really recover from this, or if I'd just learn to live with the ghost of her betrayal haunting every quiet moment. But I also knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her define my future. That was the real revenge, taking back my life piece by piece, one decision at a time. And I'd be damned if I let her take that from me. Lessons come hard sometimes, but I learned that forgiveness isn't always the answer. Sometimes the only way to heal is to cut the poison out completely. The days that followed were among the strangest of my life. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness, like ripping off a bandage, but then realizing the wound was still there, raw and exposed. I threw myself into work, tried to keep busy, but every little thing reminded me of what I'd been through. Her face haunted me, her smile, her lies, the way she had looked at him that night in secret. I kept replaying that moment when I handed her the keys, her trembling hands clutching the ring that once symbolized our future. I'd never felt so cold and so alive at the same time. I knew I'd done what I had to do. She was gone, and I'd taken back my dignity. But somehow I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost more than I'd gained. Still, I had to remind myself this was liberation. I'd taken control, and I refused to let her win by breaking me completely. My friends tried to comfort me, but honestly, I didn't want to talk about it much. I wanted time to process everything, to stand on my own and breathe again. One night, I sat on my balcony, looking out over the city. The cool air hit my face, and I finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. That's when it hit me, the silence, the emptiness, the ache of betrayal. But also a flicker of something else, hope, because I was still here. I'd survived her lies, her deceit. I'd fought my way back, and I knew I'd find a way to rebuild. I thought about all the lessons this ordeal had taught me. Trust is fragile, I realized. Sometimes it's better to see red flags early than let them grow into something toxic. I'd ignored the warning signs for too long, blinded by love, by hope. But now I understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just walking away, unbroken, stronger than ever. Looking back, I know I could have handled things differently. Maybe I shouldn't have let her get so close, or maybe I should have confronted her earlier. But what's done is done. I refuse to let the past define me. Instead, I'll use it as a lesson, an honest reminder that you can't control who betrays you, but you can control how you respond. And honestly, I feel lighter now. The weight that kept dragging me down is gone, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. I've learned to trust myself again, to listen to those small red flags that I once ignored, to value my own peace above all else. In the end, I realized that revenge isn't just about punishing someone else. It's about reclaiming your own power, your own happiness. It's about walking away from the chaos with your head held high, knowing you didn't let someone else's betrayal define your life. So here I am, finally free. The woman who once held my heart has been cast out of my life, and I'm left with a scar, yes, but also with a newfound sense of strength. I'll never forget what happened, but I'll also never let it break me. And maybe that's the true lesson. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize your own worth. No more hiding, no more pretending. Just me, standing tall, ready to face whatever comes next, unshackled and determined to rebuild, one step at a time.